Okay, well, before this story starts, um, the prophets beforehand had prophesied about the Messiah or the Christ who would come and would bring salvation to the Jewish people and and to the Gentile people as well. And before the Messiah would come, there were several prophecies that predicted his coming that said that a light would come and the light would be the dawn of the ruler or the Messiah. And another prophecy says that a star would appear and Gentiles and kings would come to the light of his coming and to the star of his coming. And Isaiah, the prophet who prophesied about 700 years before this particular event comes, also tells us that the Messiah would at least have the name of Almighty God as part of his group of names and titles. And so this is where we're going to start our story then, okay? Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, look, there came wise men from the east unto Jerusalem. And the wise men said, where is he who is born the King of the Jews? Because we have seen his star in the east, and we have come to worship him. Now, when Herod the king heard this, he was really troubled, and all of Jerusalem was troubled with him. And he inquired of the chief priests and the scribes of the people where the Christ should be born. And they said to him, in Bethlehem, Judea, because it is written by the prophet Micah, you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, you're not least among the princes of Judah, because out of you will come a governor who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod inquired very diligently of the wise men as to what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem. And he said, go, search diligently for the young child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I can go and worship him also. Then the wise men left. And look, the star they saw in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. And when the wise men saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Going into the house, they saw the young child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshiped Jesus. Then they opened up their treasures, and they gave to Jesus gifts of gold, of frankincense, and of myrrh. And that is where our story stops today. Isn't that a neat story? Did y'all enjoy that story? How fun story is it? Does anyone want to try to retell that story starting? Now, I know it may be the first time that you've heard it or that you've really seen and heard it together, but starting with, and just do the best you can. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of anyone?
Judea.
Oh, there you go, Dave. Okay, you go ahead and take over, try to tell the story as best you can.
During the reign of King Herod,
Okay.
some wise men came from the east
Okay.
and arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is he that's born King of the Jews? And they said, we have come here to worship him. Herod was very disturbed by this because I guess he wasn't aware that a king was being born. And so he asked the wise priests and religious leaders, where is he going to be born? They said, in Bethlehem in Judea. And they quoted out of Micah that Bethlehem was not the least of the princes of the cities of Judea. And out of that place would come a ruler. It would be the shepherd or governor of the people of Israel. And then he called for a private meeting with them, asking about the time that this star had appeared and uh, asking them to promise to come back and tell him where they found the young child, because he would like to go there and worship the young child as well. And they went on, and the star led them to a place, and they went in and found baby with his mother, and they bowed down and worshiped him.
Dave, you got 100% of that story right. You got King Herod, you got the wise men, you got the star, you got that they found that the secret meeting between them. I just really applaud you on that. Are you a preacher?
Well, sometimes.
Dave is with our organization, World Indigenous Missions, and he's been a missionary for about as long as I have, close to 30 years, hasn't it been?
Well, let's see. You've been a missionary a lot longer. I've just been a missionary with WIM for since 2006, and then before that, I was a missionary for 4 years. But I pastored a lot of years.
Right. You pastored for a long time too. Yeah.
So I think probably somewhere around 40 some years.
Okay, so you probably have heard that story before. You got like 98% right on. All right, let's do the story together. Maybe you guys can fill in the empty words and answer some of the questions. Now, when Jesus was born, who remembers where he was born?
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem of Judea. And who was the king?
Herod.
Herod, in the days of Herod the king. Look, who came from the east?
There was a star in the east.
Wise men came from the east, and they came to
The star.
That's right. They came to Jerusalem and said, "Where is
The King of the Jews?
where is he was born, the King of the Jews?" Because we have
Seen the star,
In the
seen the
east.
star in the east, and we have come to
worship.
worship him. Now, when Herod heard this, he said, "That is a great idea. Let's all go worship the king together. I just love the idea of a new king coming."
He was
Very
big
disturbed.
old.
He didn't say that? You're kidding. All right, what did he do? He was greatly
troubled.
troubled, and
Disturbed.
all
Yeah.
All of Jerusalem with him.
of Jerusalem was troubled with him, which will show you something about his character too. And so he went, and who did he ask? He demanded of the
time.
time. He did do the time from the wise men, and right before the
So the
time of the
star.
wise men, he inquired where the Christ should be born of who?
The chief priest,
The chief priests and the
scribe,
scribes of the people, where the Christ should be born, and they said,
and Bethlehem of Judea.
in
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem of Judea, because it is written by the
Prophet Micah.
Prophet Micah.
prophet Micah, "You, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not
Least of the
least among the
princes,
princes of Judah, because out of you will come a
ruler.
governor who will shepherd my people Israel."
Shepherd.
And then what Virgie said, he had a secret meeting with the wise men. He inquired secretly of the wise men as to
What
time.
time
what time the star appeared.
the star appeared.
That's right. And he said to them, "Go to Bethlehem,
Bethlehem
search
and look
diligently
for.
for the young child. And when you have
Search
found,
diligently for the young child.
right, and when you have found him,
Come and tell
Report.
me where you found
send
him.
me word that I may go and
Worship.
worship him also." And so the wise men left, and look, the
Star.
Star.
star they had seen in the east went
Before them,
until it came and stood over.
place where the young child was.
And when they saw the star, they,
Rejoice.
Rejoice.
Joy.
what kind of joy did they have?
Exceeding
Exceedingly great joy.
Exceeding
They
great
go
Yes.
joy.
into the
house,
house, they saw the
young child,
and
Child.
the mother,
mother,
mother, and they fell down and
Worship.
worshiped Jesus, and opening their
Open their
treasures,
gifts.
Your
they
gifts.
presented unto Jesus 3 gifts.
Gold,
Frankincense.
frankincense, and myrrh.
Myrrh, and that's where our story ended. You
That's
guys
a
did
Christmas
really good.
story.
Way to go.
That's a Christmas story.
I'm so proud of everyone. That's really good. You know, it's kind of an interesting
Good.
story because when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, wise men came from the east unto Jerusalem, and they said, where is he was born King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. What might we learn about God? That God would have, oh, that's right, I forgot about that. Well, let's just go with this question first. What might I learn about God? That God would have set up prophecy, sometimes a little oblique, thousands of years beforehand, hundreds of years beforehand, about the birth of his son, bring people from all the way on the other side of the world to come and worship his son. What might I learn about God from that?
Does anyone know exactly where they came from?
From the east. They were
Yeah,
Gentiles.
I knew that, but I mean, does anybody know any more than the East?
You know, the story says from the east. The
Yeah,
prophecies tell us they were Gentiles and there were kings among them. So that's what we know.
I think the Lord was reaching out to everyone at that point, you know? And I'm glad he was, because I would not be here if he wasn't.
Well, I mean,
He was reaching past the Jews to the Gentiles also.
What do the rest of you think about that? Virgie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, immediately a verse came to mind: for 1,000 years is but one day to God. So the prophecy that was in Micah's time, several years, is not, God is not limited by time nor by distance. So it may be very long for us, but to him, because he sees the future from the present and the past, he's it's just he's that sovereign. So that I'm reminded of the God we worship. I mean, he's not limited by time or distance.
You know, it seems rather complex, though. I mean, there's like a really complicated plan here. Prophecies ahead of time, they're a little confusing. People coming from different parts of the world, converging on Jerusalem. Could God have done anything different?
Well, he's the Alpha and the
What's that, Dad?
sorry, he's the Alpha and the Omega. Bible says he's the beginning and the end. So he knows all. If he knows the beginning, he also knows the end prior to our. Our name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. My name is in that book. Your name is in that book. Okay. How do you do that? How do you know my name? When it's written?
Well, that's a really good question.
Same thing.
This particular story, though, I mean, God could have done anything differently, couldn't he?
Of course.
Well, what else could he have done to make it more simple?
Well, I mean, if it makes it difficult, then it's more to understand, more to believe. It's the impossible when it's faith that we have to believe in what happened. It's not believing in the impossible.
So you're saying that God made it complicated so that it'd be easier to believe?
It strengthens our belief because it's our faith in Christianity has lasted forever since Christ has been on the earth. So that's what 2,000 years. So, and we know, we believe. So it's
Okay. What do the rest of you think about that?
Okay, when you're talking about it being complicated,
Right.
are you meaning that it was complicated for the wise men?
Well,
I kind of don't understand the question, because how is it not going to be complicated for somebody?
that's a really good question there.
I mean, it could be complicated for the wise men, but it was easy for the shepherds. They just had to come down from the hills.
Yeah. Okay. Now. Yeah.
So,
the prophecies about kings coming from the east at the light of his dawning and a star appearing to announce the coming of the Messiah.
Right.
You know, those are fairly oblique prophecies. They're not real clear.
Right.
So these men, these Gentiles and kings, traveled quite a distance at great expense because of a star that appeared that they were convinced announced the Messiah. Just a little, I mean, help me understand those men.
Well, that may not have been the only thing they had.
What else would they
There's a
have?
whole lot in Daniel that talks about a Messiah coming and gives more specific time frames, but you said not to bring in other verses.
Yeah, we do want to stay just with this story, what we know in this
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, but you know, you brought in just some from Isaiah, but that's not the only verses about him. And who's to know that there weren't other books that aren't in the Bible that talked about this? You know, Daniel was over there talking to you know, people and writing books and things. There might be some obscure something that we don't know anything about, that they did know about, that God didn't want to put in the Bible, but they knew about. They obviously
sharing.
believed.
Thank you for sharing that, Claudia. They obviously believed. What do you mean by that?
Well, they were willing to take all this risk to come to Jerusalem because they believed that there was this incredible king that was coming and they wanted to be there. And why would they come from the east for a Jewish king? I mean, really, unless it was something bigger than just a Jewish king.
That's really interesting. What do y'all think about that? Was it something bigger than just a Jewish king?
Evidently, something was being revealed to them. I don't know exactly what, but
Yeah.
they must have been looking for something more.
Brought
Somehow that was
incredible
assigned to them.
gifts.
They were very wealthy.
They were what, Dad?
Wealthy, very wealthy.
Okay.
You know, gold and frankincense, myrrh,
Not a
that
lot
are
of
all
money.
expensive. They were not, say, laborers. They were leaders, probably. You know, have that type of money.
Do you think these guys would have gone to the birth of another king in some other country? Or was there something special that they heard about this one?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, we do have the prophecies that we know of. And there
Okay.
was a star. They said, we have seen his star
Right,
in the east, and we have come to worship him.
right.
So-
To worship him, not just to give
Yes.
him a gift.
Yes, they came to worship him. Yes.
Yeah, so that
Yes.
speaks of something bigger.
Well, what might we learn about these men? That they would come to worship the prophetic king who would come.
It means that they knew, they believed that, you know, they believed in the one true and living God. And they knew enough of the word to know that, you know, he had promised a Messiah, a Savior, and that this was the one.
Give me a little bit more on that, Marcia.
Well, you know, there are lots of gods being worshipped all over the place, you know, and, you know, they knew that the one true and living God, he was the God who made the heavens and the earth, who can make the star come, who can, you know, and all this, and who had promised, you know, that he was sending a Messiah, he was sending someone, and you know, he was sending his own son, and they believed enough of the Jewish scriptures. I mean, they had some access to the scriptures through Daniel or whatever, and they realized that salvation was of the Jews, and this was the one.
All that from a star?
There was more than a star.
It was more than a star. Okay, we had mentioned that they knew several other things about the scriptures. You know,
The star is just an outward sign. There was things they knew that the star showed. I mean, the star didn't talk to them. They had, you know, they had words.
someone
that they
talked
had
to them.
heard.
Who talked to them? You said someone talked to them.
No, I said the star did not talk to them. They had words that came from other places. I'm assuming that it was prophecies that they had read. Because honestly, I don't think these guys just wandered around hunting for princes to be born. This was way bigger than that. They didn't come to just giving presents, they came to worship.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. Virgil, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I agree with Marcia and Claudia. I mean, they were not wise. They were not called wise men for nothing. So they know history. They know a lot. So a star was just kind of what a sign for what they knew was already coming. So
Oh, okay.
they had a lot of information already beforehand. I mean, the prophecies, the all of it. So a star
Well,
was
I
something,
don't
I
know. Did
think.
they have the prophecies? Because Herod, he's the one that asked his priests to find out where, and these guys didn't seem to have that information. They just came to him and asked, "Where is he?" I mean, if they knew the prophecies of Micah, they would have said, "Well, we're going to go to
Bethlehem
Bethlehem."
of Judah.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
well, let's go to that part. Herod, when he heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all of Jerusalem was troubled with him. Herod was a Jewish king, though, wasn't he?
No.
Well, he was reigning in Jerusalem.
Yeah, but he
It
was
doesn't
a
make him Jewish.
Well,
Is he
I mean,
a Jew?
he was the king at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's set up by the Romans.
But he was Jewish, right?
no.
No.
I think he had married into some Jewish family.
But wouldn't he be excited about the Messiah coming?
Nope.
That doesn't make sense. I mean,
Competition.
It's a threat.
a threat.
Yes, definitely a
Help me
threat.
understand
Yeah,
that. You guys are talking conspiracy here. Help me understand that. Go ahead, Virgie. Tell me about that threat.
I think any king would like to rule forever. So because of the power, uh, of everything. So any would-be king, even if it's a newborn child, would be a threat.
Here's a little child. I
Yeah.
think we've seen enough about politics to know that you don't get to the top by being nice. So
Yes.
That's so true.
Yeah. Very true.
okay, that all Jerusalem was troubled with King Herod. Could King Herod have, instead of being troubled, could he have felt a different way? Could he have done anything different?
I mean, the way his heart was, no. But
I mean, could he have prayed and asked God?
yeah.
Okay, could he have? I mean, he did consult with the chief priests. We'll go to that in just a second. But I mean, it really bothered him.
Well, he wasn't really a legitimate king. I mean, he was an Edomite and
He was sitting on
enemy
the
of the,
throne at the time, and he probably had an army to protect him.
yeah, but I mean, he kind
sure
of
did.
bought it.
He sent them to kill the babies.
Well, that's in another story completely, Claudia. We won't go there today.
I know, well, you did say it. anyway.
Okay, so King Herod, King Herod. Now wait a minute. Wasn't King Herod placed there by God? In the long
No.
run? Now all authority comes from God,
Yeah, kings
doesn't it?
rise and fall because of him.
So I mean, if he's placed there by God, and God is sending his Messiah, and these people are telling him about the future Messiah coming, wouldn't that be good news to him? I mean, shouldn't it be good news to him? Obviously it wasn't, but shouldn't it be?
Should be.
Should be. The fact that it wasn't good news to King Herod, what might that tell us about him?
He was self-serving.
Not a follower of God.
Even though God had placed him in that position.
He didn't know God had placed him in that position.
Self-serving.
How would he know?
He probably wanted his way.
So the impact of hearing that the Messiah had come, what did that do to Herod?
We're not supposed to go past the story.
Well, I mean, right now in the story, it did something.
Holding back.
It bothered him. It bothered him, right?
Mhm.
And so then he went and demanded of the chief priests and the scribes where the Christ should be born. So he knew that the Christ was coming. He knew that this birth was the birth of the Christ. Just like the wise men knew, right?
Yeah, interestingly, he didn't do anything until they didn't come back.
Yeah, yeah. That is interesting. The wise men were filled with joy, and Herod was bothered.
That's true.
The chief priests knew.
None of them went
Here
either.
either.
Scribes didn't go either.
Yeah.
Weren't they interested in the Messiah?
What do you think?
I don't know. It's strange to me.
Evidently
Sounds
not.
like to me they were interested in the Messiah, but yet they were awful confused on which one to go to.
Well, see, what's bothering me, I guess, is that God could have sent the wise men straight to Bethlehem. And he didn't. He sent them to Jerusalem, to chief priests and to scribes and to King Herod.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys help me understand God, because this is really confusing to me. Because like Claudia is biting her tongue to say, the consequences of this were rather
Brutal.
drastic.
Yes.
So can anyone help me understand God?
God works in mysterious ways.
That's true.
His wonders to perform.
God says my ways are not what my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. So we cannot even think like God thinks. He says it in the Bible.
What might we learn about God that he would be interested in the chief priests and the scribes recognizing that prophecy as being valid?
That's a good point.
Well, what might we learn about God from that?
He gave them a choice,
Help me
just
understand
like
that.
he's done from the beginning. He gave them a choice, and they knew what was of him, and they chose otherwise.
Good.
It's like he's trying to just show the two kingdoms in absolute stark contrast from the very beginning.
Wouldn't it make sense for people to remember this happening? This is a strange thing. A star, kings coming from the east, wealthy people coming straight to Jerusalem, saying that the Messiah is born, chief priests confirming it. Wouldn't that be, that's not a common occurrence, is it?
Mm-mm.
But the Jews of today still don't believe.
Well, they didn't believe 2,000 years ago, that's for sure.
They don't believe it today either. I mean, they're stubborn, like God said, they're stubborn people.
So were the chief priests, the scribes, and King Herod stubborn?
Yeah, he was frightened.
Yeah. Come try.
In a way.
I would say he was more frightened.
Could these chief priests and scribes have done anything different besides just say where the Christ was going to be born?
It would make sense to me. They'd want to go, but they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, if they truly were interested in God's will, it seems to me like they'd be down there and we'll go with you. But they didn't.
Do you think lesser priests and lesser scribes also knew about what was going on?
I don't know.
Well, it says all Jerusalem was troubled, bothered by this.
They were troubled, but it doesn't say they knew why King Herod was troubled. It said he was troubled and the city was troubled with him because he has a tendency to kill people when he gets upset. So,
Yeah, that is true.
but they might not have realized these guys come from the east and the king is upset. That may be all they know. They may not have any idea that they're talking about the King of the Jews, the Messiah, or any of that stuff. They just know the mood. They don't want to be part of it.
Do you think the family members of the chief priests and the scribes might have known?
Possibly. Do all men come home and talk about their work?
Strange parts of it they do.
They might not have.
And
And
so,
even if they did, what you know, the women didn't travel by themselves, not that far.
so King Herod finds out in Bethlehem. God told Micah to tell the people, no, that's in Bethlehem. And so Herod goes privately and talks to the wise men about what time the star had appeared. Then he tells them, go to Bethlehem and search diligently for the child. And when you found him, bring me word that I can go and worship him too. Which is a little strange to me. So when they left Herod, the star they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy.
Maybe
It's-
the star was another child of God or something. I have no clue.
It's kind of interesting that God would, because God did not have to send, he could have sent them straight to Bethlehem, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and he didn't. He didn't send them straight to Bethlehem. He sent them first to advise Herod and the chief priests and the scribes. And then he sent them to Bethlehem. So help me understand what we might learn about God, that God did it that way. God wanted these Gentiles and kings and wealthy men. You think they traveled just themselves? Or you think they had an entourage?
There was an entourage.
There was an entourage. So it's a big event going on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what might we learn about God that he would draw so much attention to the birth of his son? But the chief priests and the scribes were not that interested in it.
That he wanted to expose their hearts for what they were.
Whoa. Okay. Do you think he wanted to do anything else? Just expose them?
I'm wondering when Herod asked the chief priests and the scribes for where the Messiah was supposed to be born, did he reveal to them that these wise men had come to go find him, or did he just simply
The
ask-
story doesn't say. I think that we can assume that the coming of the wise men to Jerusalem was not hidden from anyone.
No, but the purpose of their trip might not have been
The
revealed.
purpose of the trip might have been hidden, but I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, what do y'all think? You think that this might have been something known by people, or think the purpose of their trip might have been, I mean, they came saying, where is he who was born King of the Jews?
Well, they went to Herod and said that. I
The
don't
story
think
doesn't say that. The story says they came to Jerusalem and they said, where is the one who was born King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east and we've come to worship him.
Well, no doubt about that. Everybody excited then, if they said it to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you're going into a city, you don't know who to talk to. So
I would think they would go to the Pharisees just because that they should know. They should have the scriptures and know what where their Messiah was going to be born.
okay. So this was not hidden. This was a common thing, right?
Right. I think everybody knew, but not everybody believed.
What do you mean by that, Dave?
Hmm.
Help me understand that. Go ahead, Dave. Give me some more on that. Everybody knew,
I
but not
think
everybody
that,
believed.
yeah, I think that obviously the wise men believed enough to be moved from where they were at to where they thought the Messiah would be. But the people there, even though they knew some of the prophecies and heard some of the prophecies, they were not moved enough in faith to believe what actually was taking place in their time.
King Herod believed.
I think Herod just covered his bases. That's why he said, you find him, come back and send word to me, I'll come and worship him. I
Yeah.
don't think he believed it. He was troubled, but I think he was taking his chances that it wasn't really true.
Oh, that's interesting. What about the chief priests and the scribes? What do you think they thought? What do you think about that? Help me. This is a strange story here.
Well, typically, God really likes that you have beliefs. And I would say that they had unbelief, that they didn't believe he was really being born, or their Messiah it wasn't his time. I'm not sure why they didn't believe, but I feel that they didn't have belief in what was going on.
See, because when the wise men saw the star right over where Jesus was, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. But the chief priests and the scribes and King Herod, all placed there by God with the scriptures at their ready. I mean, this was like something they knew. What might we learn about them that these foreigners believed, but the people that had the word, the chosen people, didn't? You guys got to help me, man.
Is it got something to do with the fact that the foreign kings, the foreign wise men, they had nothing to lose but everything to gain, whereas the people in Jerusalem, those in power in Jerusalem, had their power to lose. I mean, if this was the legitimate king of the Jews, then he's our king. He reigns. What he says go, and we don't have our little internal power structure anymore.
Wow. What do y'all think about that? That's kind of an interesting statement.
Good statement. That's good. Do you think the Pharisees had kind of deteriorated from a spiritual thing to a set of rules, and he wasn't following the rules? And why would someone come out of, why would he not be here? Basically.
Uh-huh.
But he wasn't within the framework of what they had established as this is the way we do things and these are our rules, and it's not our people.
Yeah.
Just the ordinary people. Why would the Messiah become as an ordinary person?
That's a very interesting statement too, Claudia. Why would the Messiah come as an ordinary person?
Well, it makes sense to us because we are, but these were the high priests. These were the, spiritual leaders.
They thought highly of themselves. I guess they were expecting him to come like they were.
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe from one of them, like my son or my child.
Yeah, how come my son's not the one? Why is this guy over here? This carpenter's kid.
Kind of interesting. They saw the star. They rejoiced with great joy, exceedingly great joy. They came into the house and they saw Jesus and his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshiped Jesus. What do you think they might have been feeling at that instant when they fell down and worshiped? What do you think they were thinking or feeling in their hearts?
Well, if they felt the Spirit of God, like many of us have felt, it was probably the most wonderful thing in their lives.
Dave, you feel like you want to say something. I can see you struggling to say something there.
Well, just maybe they were satisfied at that long journey.
That it was worth it.
Now they've seen what they've been looking for, and I think that it was a wonderful life-changing experience.
Anyone else want to offer a comment on the story we haven't looked at yet? Or something we have?
The interesting thing to me is the star. It's oftentimes interpreted as a astrological event. I personally don't see it as that. If you read the text, it's the weirdest star. It's the weirdest star that ever existed. And I believe it was, to me, I believe it was an angel. And they saw what appeared to be a star, but it moved.
Okay.
And it moved in a way that they could identify it GPS right over that house.
Yeah, it was a low hanging star for sure. Yeah, that is very interesting. Is there something that you might want to tell us about God, maybe that might occur to you, that God would do something like that, use a star or whatever it is?
I think he's a God of revelation. He likes to reveal himself to people. People who are seeking to know more, know him, know something more than what they know. I think God's more than willing to reveal himself.
You know, Dave said something really interesting here. He said that God is a God of revelation. And in the story, we saw that God did reveal himself to Gentiles and kings on the other side of the world that traveled a long ways. And he also revealed himself to the chief priests and the scribes and to Herod. And only one group of those, the wise men found faith in Christ. Today, does God still reveal himself to all kinds of people?
Yes.
But only a few sometimes find faith in Christ? Does he still do that?
Yes.
Well, how does God reveal himself to all kinds of people? What does he do?
In all kinds of ways.
Give me a couple.
Dreams are being used over to a lot of those Islamic believers now.
God is using dreams. Okay, yeah. What else?
Dreams and visions.
Visions, Dave. Okay, yeah.
Of course, Bible says that creation itself is a revelation to us.
Yeah.
God's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, have you or someone you know had the revelation of God given to them and chose to follow it and find faith? And you want to talk about it?
Like in a dream or something? Or what do you?
Any way that God's revealed himself and produced faith in people. Don't want to talk about the ones that don't have faith. That's boring. Or anyone you know, maybe one of your missionary experiences or evangelism experiences where God revealed himself. People chose to have faith.
I don't know.
I would say he's revealed himself to all of us at some point.
Well, yeah, at some point.
I mean, every one of us has a statement of when God was revealed to us. Obviously, we're all different and we all have different experiences for the most part.
Well, let me share experience with y'all. I was working in a squatters colony in Mexico, and what a squatters colony is there's a large piece of property that's not being used except as an investment by the owner. And so this group of several thousand people will go and crash on it. And we're talking several thousand people, maybe on 100-acre property. And they partition off their little roads and they have their own areas. I mean, they plot out the land. It's like done in a day. And all of a sudden you've got 2,000 or 3,000 people on a mid-sized Texas ranch, and getting them out of there is not going to happen easily. And over the course of time, often enough, the government will recognize that as a legal area, give deeds to the people. They'll pay off the owner of the land if he can afford a lawyer, and people will get their property that way. And so this was happening in an area, and there were no Christian churches there. And so we went there with the hopes of starting a church. And I had talked to and visited with the people, and the man that was in charge of the 3,000 people was a man named Titus. He was a very short man, maybe 4.5 feet at the tallest. And it was very interesting because he had at least 2 wives or women that lived with him, and it was pretty much public knowledge too. And so we talked to him and asked permission to start meeting with people and sharing the gospel. And if he could not oppose us at the very least. And he gave permission and started talking to people. And then we decided we wanted to do a campaign. And so we got permission from him to do the campaign. And we prayed for the sick and people that might have not been healthy or whatever at the campaign. And God poured out, I mean, it was like a bucket of water pouring out miracles. There were hundreds of people healed of many different diseases. Hands that couldn't open were opened. People that were sick constantly with stomach problems were healed. I mean, it was like there were hundreds of miracles over the course of 3 days. It was so exciting. Hundreds of people came to the Lord, and we said, we're going to come in 2 days and we're going to start a church right here. If you want to be a part of the church, come. And I'm thinking to myself, we're going to have the biggest church in the world right here, you know? And so 2 days later, it was on a Thursday, we go there and I walk into the neighborhood and I hear a song, a Christian song being sung, Holy, Holy, Holy. And there was a group of about 20 people over here. And then I go on a little further and there's another group and there's another group and another group. And there were about 20 churches started just in that one day. And it was interesting because I was left with 3 people that nobody else wanted. So someone who was a Baptist or a Lutheran or a Methodist or Presbyterian went and got their pastor and said, God's doing something in this neighborhood, help me. And they got their neighbors together and started their own little churches right there. And that was really interesting that instead of starting one church, the Lord started about 20 or so churches. It was a good experience for me to realize that God does not want me in the church planting business, but maybe in the church helping other churches get started, helping other people. I didn't quite pass that test. I got a little upset, honestly. And the 3 people that we had lasted about a year, and then it all dissolved. And we moved on to Cuernavaca, where we work now with helping churches grow, which is a lot better for me. I really enjoy doing that and seeing that happen. And if I had had the vision of the Lord in my mind a little bit better, I'm sure the Lord had revealed it to me, but like King Herod and the scribes and Pharisees, I wasn't listening. And I could have helped 20 churches grow instead of not starting one. So the Lord really appeared. He really poured out his blessing, and that was really cool. So anybody else have a story similar to that they want to share, or something like the Lord's helping people come to know him?
I can share a story.
Let's do it, Dad.
My wife's friend one time called and said that to my wife that she was going to have a baby girl, and then the slate would be wiped clean. And so my wife got all excited and told me the story, and and I said, sure, And about 3 years passed, and my wife didn't want a baby girl, and there was an adoption going on, and the women tried to abort a baby, which my wife was a nurse, and baby weighed 2 pounds and was in an incubator. And it came time to take the baby home from the hospital. And I'd had no money to pay the bill. The baby was in there under intensive care, and I was really concerned how I was going to do that. And I went to the cashier and figured that, well, maybe they'll be lenient and let me pay it off. And when I asked for the bill, the lady looked at me and she said, there's no bill. The slate has been wiped clean. And that was exactly what my wife had heard like 6 years earlier.
Wow.
And
So you adopted that baby?
We adopted that baby, and she's a beautiful young lady today. And
I think I know her.
you talk about strengthening a man's faith, it really did,
So how'd that make you feel when the lady said exactly those words, the slate is wiped clean? What did that make you feel?
Made, and when I, because I had known what was said, and what really was exciting when I told my wife, I mean, she started to scream, like, thank you, God, I mean, really screaming in the elevator as we were going down, and I thought the whole hospital heard, Yeah, it was one of the, because I was, very doubtful, about prayers being answered, because my mother had been praying for a baby, and this came from someone that, I didn't know. My wife really didn't know the person that had told the story, but it came from a friend of my wife's. This woman said this, so it was.
Wow.
So
When the Lord answered that word to you, what changed it? How did that change your life? Besides having an extra child, what else did that change your life in? How else did that affect you?
Well, I believe almost every day is a miracle now. I don't know a little bit about me. I have a lot of children. I've adopted many children. Over the years, I have 7 biological and I have 22 children. It kind of opened the doors for me. And people will say, how did you do that? And I say, God did that. I didn't do a thing. How did I afford to do that? God did that. And it just one miracle after another. And sitting next to me, Timothy, you can talk with Timothy too. We talk every day. We talk about everything being miracles, just everything we
Even
do,
little things in life.
just little things. And we recognize them, that almost everything is like, or prepared for by God, the good or the bad, and the other day, everything went wrong. And Timothy said, well, what's going on? And I said to him, we're fighting the devil. I mean, I said, the devil has given us a hard time today. And Timothy, what were some of the things that he gave us a hard time on?
Like a wouldn't start. And
car wouldn't start, type of thing.
we'd have the battery was dead.
The battery was dead. Then, my daughter called me up and said her car was broken down, and it was just one thing after another. And Timothy said, well, what's going on? And I said, go get it, child. I said, we're winning a battle. We're winning a war with the devil. And he is really, really giving us a hard time today, okay? And the next day was a beautiful day. And like today, it was